deified. The clans tell tales of him. Few know the truth. He was mortal once, as were we all. However, his contempt for humanity drove him to create me and my brethren.
The year was 2004. One day, I get back from school, and waiting for me was the original PlayStation. Alongside it, a box filled with video games. I couldn't believe my eyes. Turns out, a friend of my dad was leaving the country and decided to give away his old console and all his game collection. That box was loaded, from Breath of Fire 4 to SmackDown 2 Know Your Role, from Bugs Bunny Lost in Time to Tekken 3. It took me years to play through those games, but among them was a game that always stood out. A game that I would boot up, play through the first few rooms, and quit. Not because of difficulty or because it was a bad game, but because it would scare me. That game was Legacy of Kain's Soul Reaver.
Few know the truth. I stood with Kain and my brethren until I had the honor of surpassing my lord. For my transgression, I earned a new kind of reward. Agony.
In the most recent state of play, PlayStation announced way too many remasters, remakes, and DLCs, but that doesn't matter because by the end, people walked away happy because we're getting a new Ghost of Tsushima with boobs. For me, though, the highlight was the announcement of the remaster of both Soul Reaver games. Although technically the second entry on this franchise, Soul Reaver tells the story of Raziel, a loyal servant to his master Kain, the protagonist of the first game. After Raziel reveals being a new evolution of the vampire species by showing his wings to his master, Kain rips them out of jealousy and throws him to the Lake of the Dead, an acid-like whirlpool that should have been the end of Raziel. But since that wouldn't make for much of a story, Raziel is brought back as a corpse who feeds on souls instead of blood. His savior, simply named the Elder God, is just a bunch of tentacles with eyes that just evoke the feeling of Lovecraftian creatures like Cthulhu to a T. And this is why I got so attached to this game. After 2 decades, my obsession for both monstrous vampires and the Cthulhu mythos remains with me, and this game might have been my first real contact with both themes. Gameplay-wise, Raziel just fights against ghouls and other wraiths while trying to make his way back to the surface and get his revenge on Kain. Despite looking like a soul-sucking cockroach, he's equipped with the closest to a lightsaber the copyright gods allow him, and the ability to jump back and forth between the land of the living and the underworld, which in this game is a twisted mirror image of the real world. But at that time, I was around 7 years old, and this game was not for me. Even though I could play games like Mortal Kombat and Harry Potter without a problem, trust me, that haggard face was nightmare fuel. The atmosphere for this game was just too much. Between the somber atmosphere and dark corridors to the gross creatures you'd have to kill to move on, Soul Reaver was just a perfect blend of action platform meets horror game. Now you ask me, why haven't you gone back since and played those games? You scared? And my answer to that is no. Well, maybe a little. I mean, I've thought about it, but last time I looked back at this franchise, I realized these games haven't really aged that well.
Below me swirled an ominous-looking mist. I knew that if I fell, it would mean my peril.
That's Defiance, the last game in the franchise, and look how many blur effects that game has. It makes my last hangover seem as crisp as that one branch in a horror movie.
Stepped on branch.
But that only means the possibilities for improvement in these games are greater. Between injecting life to Raziel's soulless voice actor, that Pinhead did not deserve the gift it was presented with, to revamping the combat, hopefully this is way more than a graphical overhaul. To be honest, I find it odd they're remastering what are technically the second and third games, keeping their vintage look intact while also brightening the game, which to strip it from the atmosphere that made it so recognizable, instead of remaking all games from scratch. But the answer to that is this is probably a test to see how profitable these franchises can be in 2024. If so, Crystal Dynamics can have all my cash because this sucker is about to finally play the game that haunted his childhood. See ya.